Welcome back to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 137, Whiskey Review number 57. This is Monday, November 6, 2023, and tonight we'll examine Bower Hill Reserve Rye, one of my most recent additions to the military whiskey collection. Veterans Day is coming up this weekend, so I wanted to interrupt my Texas Rye Whiskey Tournament by reviewing a military whiskey, maybe even two. I've got another one that I want to review, so maybe I'll do that next week. But I've got well over a dozen whiskeys that I call military whiskeys. But what exactly does that mean? As a veteran of the Army and a patriotic American with a degree in history, I like studying the history of whiskeys and the tradition of whiskey companies to link their product with history in some way. And some do that by deliberately tying their brand or just one expression maybe with the military or with some event in American history or just a historical person, maybe a patriotic theme. I mean, I think of James E. Pepper's 1776 brand, right? So there's lots of ways to do this. And then there's some whiskeys that are directly marketed to and even owned by veterans. And so you think of Hooten Young whiskey, where Master Sergeant retired Norm Hooten of Black Hawk Down fame, Battle of Mogadishu. He started a whiskey company, right? And then the Hotel Tango distillery, they're veteran owned. So, there's some there's a scale. And at the bottom of the scale is a mystery company like this that gloms on to an event in history to honor that historical event. And there's nothing really wrong with that. I mean, to me, it's a little bit irritating when, this would be better if this whiskey company came from Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, where the Battle of Bower Hill took place. That would make it extra special, okay? But the fact that a whiskey company in Ohio or Kentucky, wherever this is from, there's some mystery there. The fact that they are honoring this battle, this piece of American history, I'm fine with that. That's great. So I collect military whiskeys or patriotic whiskeys. So the summary. This is a mystery whiskey that lacks transparency and clarity to a degree, but it's got a cool bottle. The name has this rich, relatively unknown, I might add, history, and I enjoy the taste and the nose on this rye. And of course, it's probably MGP. The price was a bit high, though, and to make it worse, I think this may be a dead brand. I think it's a ghost whiskey now. Their website doesn't even have a rye on there. I got the last bottle at my Total Wine, and actually my wife found that for me, and it was the last bottle, and it was $48. I ended up giving it a score of 72, which is pretty low because it gets hit pretty hard with lack of transparency. But a letter grade, I gave it a B because it's enjoyable to drink. But I'm easy to please, so who knows. But if you're a history nerd who enjoys collecting military or patriotic whiskeys, this whiskey's for you. And they do have some bourbons. Okay, I could not find any more ryes on their website or in any store, but they do have some bourbons. So let's go through this score line by line and see what we find here. So first of all, history. Some history of this expression in the whiskey company first. Bower Hill. This is, again, I'm calling it a mystery whiskey because it says on the bottle that it is distilled in Indiana, so we're assuming MGP. But then it also says proudly bottled by Bower Hill Distillery in Silverton, Ohio. So I Google Silverton, Ohio, and I look at distilleries, and there's nothing called Bower Hill in Silverton, Ohio. I could not find it. Some of the reviews that I read uh, said that the company was located in Kentucky. Some of the older reviews from like 2017, 2018. So this has been around a while. So there's confusion there. The evidence seems to be pointing to this being a whiskey company that has no distillery, even though it said that, and that they have no plans for distillery. All they do is provide a name and marketing, and then they source their whiskeys. They contract out the bottling to another distillery, and yet is bottled under their name, Bower Hill. And that kind of a setup always irritates me. But nonetheless, they have a great name, great bottle, link themselves to a great American story. It's full of drama, military action, controversy, with ramifications for today, and it's understudied from a historian's viewpoint. This company, I guess, has been around since about 2016. At least that's the earliest review that I found. Several reviews exist for their various bourbons, but only a few, very few for this rye. Whiskey Wash did a short review in 2016. The Bower Hill website, again, it no longer lists the rye, so that's kind of weird. Again, there's no more bottles at Total Wine. There's bourbons available, but no ryes. And when I searched all the websites for the rye, nobody has it. One review from Reddit in 2021 listed the rye as coming from Louisville, but the distillery was unknown, and they listed the mash bill as 51 rye, 49 barley, which is weird. I don't think that's trustworthy. I wouldn't buy that. Although, when I tasted there's some differences here with this rye from other ryes. So there's a little bit of unique thing going on here. Now, to the history behind the Battle of Bower Hill and why they named it for this. After the American Revolution and developing and voting on the Constitution, the young American Republic had a mountain of debt. Imagine that. Wars are expensive. Yeah, we're still paying. And forming a new country and government is a daunting task. The new country needed to raise money, and one of the biggest products in America was whiskey. Americans grew a lot of corn. They made a lot of whiskey, and they drank a lot of whiskey. If you study the drinking habits of Americans from way back, it's amazing. So then, well, if you got to raise money, let's tax the whiskey, right? An excise tax on the whiskey. So in 1791, this tax on whiskey was imposed, and the farmers and distillers did not like it one bit. Whiskey was overtaking rum as the favorite distilled spirit in America, and whiskey, like tobacco down south, had become a medium of exchange in an economy that was short of cash and specie. From the farmer's perspective, and most were veterans of the Revolutionary War, this tax was the very kind of thing for which they had fought against England. They considered it un-American. They considered it taxation without representation. And the way the tax was set up, it punished the small farmer who operated a still part of the year and let the big distillers back east pay less. Sounds like today. Yeah. This is how government always operates, by the way. So the small-time farmer and distiller in western Pennsylvania, they got together and began resisting this tax, even resorting to tarring and feathering one of the tax collectors by the name of Robert Johnson. In September of 1792, then President Washington issued a proclamation condemning this rebellion. General John Neville, a wealthy landowner and big distiller in western Pennsylvania, where all this trouble was coming from, he became a tax inspector. Even though he had initially opposed the tax, now he's for the tax. So before he was for the tax, he was against the tax. Right. As he went through the area, he had a U.S. Marshal named David Lennox with him. They came under fire, and then they had a retreat. Neville retreated to his home outside of Pittsburgh, Lennox back to his home in Pittsburgh. The next day, July 16th, 1794, the Mingo Creek Militia, I like the name of that, surrounded the home of General Neville on Bower Hill. Neville, you see, was a leader in the militia all the way back to the French and Indian Wars. Wow. And then in the Revolutionary War, he commanded Fort Pitt, fought in many battles in the Revolution. So this guy was a local hero, an experienced soldier, a patriot. By the next day, the rebels' force had swollen to over 600, and they were commanded by another Revolutionary War hero, Major James McFarland. Now, there's another mystery whiskey named for James McFarland, right? I don't have one. I might get one sometime, but there's another whiskey honoring the same battle, but this time it's called McFarland. The next day, then, shooting commenced, and McFarland was killed along with a couple of others, and several were wounded. The rebellion then grew worse, and some were even calling for secession. Imagine that. From the newly founded United States. President Washington then had to raise an army from the militias of Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey. But when they were raising this militia to form an army, many resisted being drafted into federal service. And now draft protests erupted in all these states. So this is a serious crisis for the young republic. As the army moved west under Washington's direct leadership, they encountered much resistance, but only a few protesters were killed. So this is the only time in history where an acting president is also like general of the army and leading troops into battle. By October of 1794, the protest and rebellion had collapsed in the face of this federalized army with Washington at the head. Few of the rebels were arrested and charged, but Washington eventually pardoned them, and the tax was in place and made money. The Whiskey Rebellion then was a huge thing, and again, it's under-taught today. I've got a couple of books. Of course, I would have a couple of books. This one by Hoagland, Whiskey Rebellion, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and the Frontier Rebels who challenged America's newfound sovereignty. There you go. And then this one, that one's been out for about 20 years, but this one came out this year. The Whiskey Rebellion, A Distilled History of an American Crisis by Brady Kreitzer. So, you know, if you're a serious history guy and whiskey nerd, there you go. Those books would be excellent additions to your whiskey collection. So scoring for the history of this whiskey is complex because I really don't like these mystery whiskey companies that have no distillery, no faces or names attached, no physical address. But this whiskey has a great name with a rich history. So I split the difference and give this whiskey a history score of 3 out of 5. Marketing, bottle, packaging. This is a very attractive decanter style bottle with a rubber stopper that's a beast to pull the stopper out. I mean, you could throw this at somebody and hurt them. The flags that you see here on the bottle, this is way cool. The flags are actual replicas of real flags flown in Pennsylvania during the Whiskey Rebellion. There you go. So I find that a wonderful detail that's accurate. And again, the neck has this attractive patriotic banner all around, and down here some stars, and you know, all in all, I think it's a fantastic piece of marketing bottle. So I'm going to say, you know, and the only thing bad about the marketing is that, again, the rye is apparently gone. I don't know. I've never seen this advertised, so I'm going to only give it a 4 out of 5, but I really do like the bottle. 4 points. Composition. This whiskey is a 43% ABV, which is 86 proof, which is great for a rye. The label says it's a straight rye, so that means it's been aged no less than 2 years. Coming from Indiana, MGP knows their ryes, so I'm sure it's good stuff. And again, I'm going to mention that one reviewer that I read that said something about a mash bill being 51% rye and 49% malted barley. That's got to be bogus. I mean, I smell and taste the corn in here. So I'm going to believe the 51% rye, and I'm going to say, it's probably the rest is corn, and then 5% barley or something. That's what I would guess. But there is an unusual taste in here. Uh, so I don't know. That maybe a very high rye or high barley rye. I'm not sure. So the lack of clarity about who bottles this. I mean, it says Bower Hill Distillery and it's Silverton, Ohio. I couldn't find it when I looked up Silverton, Ohio and distilleries. So I don't know. Composition, only 7 out of 15 points. Physical appearance. This whiskey's not real dark for sure, but neither is it a pale yellow. It's kind of a copper, amber, gold color there maybe. So physical appearance, 3 out of 5. Nosing. Smells like it's got a good nose. Rye spice, sweetness, corn. I mean, I smell the corn, I think. Caramel. Maybe a little bit of grassiness, but this is a very pleasant nose, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. So now the all-important tasting. Taste is very good. Rye up front, but also the sweetness from the corn. This has got to have corn in it. There is a taste in here that's kind of hard to tell, and so it may be higher barley than I would think. I don't know. I mean, there's a softness in here. Maybe a malty taste. I'm not sure. So it's a little bit different for a rye. Spiciness comes in on the finish. It's not a long-lasting finish. It's no rich flavors lingering, but there's nothing offensive here. This is MGP, but I'm very pleased with this. So I'm going to say 22 out of 25 points for the flavor. The mouthfeel and finish. Mouthfeel's adequate. It's not thin by any stretch of the imagination. It's not super rich either, but that's an adequate mouthfeel. It's got an appropriate burn for 86 proof. Nice tingle. But no lingering flavors. That's a little bit of a disappointment on the finish. 12 out of 15. Price and availability, Total Wine, $48, but I think it's not listed anymore on the website. It's not in the store. Goody Goody lists it for, so Total Wine lists it for 48, but Goody Goody for $59.99. That's too expensive for this, but it's also listed as unavailable. I've never seen it there. Specs doesn't even list it. So I really think this is a ghost whiskey, that it's a dead whiskey brand now. So it's overpriced for sure. Even $48 at Total Wine. I mean, I went ahead and got it, but for the flavors and everything, it's overpriced. But for the history and the bottle, yeah, I don't know. So 5 out of 10 points for price, value, and availability. Neat or mixer? I like it neat. I think the flavors are strong enough to where it could work in a cocktail, but maybe not quite strong enough. So only 4 points for neat or mixer. Bonus points. Again, the whole mystery whiskey thing is irritating, but the flavor's interesting. The nose is good. The history's outstanding. You got an attractive bottle, so 4 out of 5 bonus points. Total score 72. My letter grade is a B, which emphasizes the flavors. I mean, this is enjoyable to drink. I mean, absolutely. There's nothing wrong here. Are there better ryes? Yeah. And it's overpriced? Yeah. But this is a good B. So, recommendation: the whiskey may not be in production anymore. It's priced higher than it's worth for taste alone, but I think the historical background makes the whiskey compelling. If you're a history nerd, a whiskey nerd who collects military whiskeys, this would be worth the buy. I'm glad I got the whiskey, and I would do it again. But I can only recommend it for those like me who love history, the history behind the name. Well, that does it for StabtheDragon this time. And since Veterans Day is coming up on the 11th, I might just do another military-related whiskey next week. Or, I could go back to Texas Rye Tournament. I'm not sure. But out here.